West Africa. He joins us for an assessment of the presidential media encounter, press encounter, which happened last night. Thank you so much for your patience, Sule. I guess we'll get straight to it. I mean, what are your initial thoughts of how last night went?
Well, could you thank you very much. I think I should start by saying that these media encounters are really very important. Under President Akufo-Addo, I think 3 of them were held. For 2019, when he promised that he would try and do 2 of them every year, but that just ended as a promise because it was never held again. But I should say that, as you may recall, we used to do an analysis of those encounters. And after the 2019 one, I had a call from Madam Elizabeth Ohene, who appeared quite unhappy about the analysis we had done. And I remember she making an indication, what if it doesn't happen again? And for whatever reason, it never happened. So one can only hope that under President Mahama, this will be a routine thing to afford the media the opportunity to ask the questions that may be on the hearts of the Ghanaian people. And I think that's what happened yesterday.
All right. So, I mean, perhaps we'll start with the president himself, and then we'll also come to the media. So he eventually, by the end of it, had answered every question. But what do you think of the quality of his answers, the depth of information shared? Was he being honest? Did you walk away from it feeling like the president has updated you thoroughly on these issues?
Well, I think generally the president did quite well. There were 25 questioners who asked a total of 31 questions. And the president, as you said, tried to touch on all of them. I think it was a good thing to see some of the people who asked the questions do so in G. And the president also making sure that in answering those specific questions, he answered them in the local language. I think it was something that was beautiful and quite encouraging.
Yeah.
The president, I should say, was quite honest on literally all the questions, except that I wasn't quite satisfied with his responses to the important questions around Galamsey. Otherwise, the way he responded to the question about the cedi depreciation and appreciation, I think demonstrated a depth of knowledge on the issues around how the economy is being handled, recognizing that he is not an economist. And so for him to demonstrate, how recent and how current he is on the development was, for me, something that was fulfilling. And I think he was also honest in terms of his comment about the Bank of Ghana's role in the initial days and how that may have contributed to the resilience of our local currency. And then, of course, making the point that at some point the Bank of Ghana had to withdraw. And the critical point he makes about his previous statement relating to at some point the city having to find its true value. And so he believes that we are getting closer to that point where the city is, getting to what its real value should be. We can only hope that we are able to manage the currency this way so that we wouldn't see a sharp depreciation as we saw at some point in 2024. So I think generally the president did well. It's not easy to be on your feet literally for almost 2 hours at his age. So I think it's quite commendable.
Now, he started off with a sort of some introductory remarks, if you will. That also has become tradition. Except I do recall that the last press encounter the president had in his first term, he started off by saying, "This is for you, so I won't have any preliminary comments. Just ask me your questions." And that was it. I remember that very clearly. That was 2016, I think it was. So this time around, though, he had preliminary remarks, as is customary. What did you think of that?
I think, if you ask me, that would be one of the low points in terms of the format. Not in terms of what he said, but in terms of the format of the encounter. Initially, Honorable Felix had indicated it was going to be an hour and a half session. I think eventually it lasted for almost 2 hours. But the president spoke for 28 minutes with the initial remarks. And that's about 22% of the time for the encounter. That's almost a quarter. And that is just the preliminary remarks. If you were to add the time he used in responding to the questions, you would come to the president having used more than an hour, speaking in terms of his preliminary remarks and also the responses. Ideally, we should have a situation where more of the questions much of the time is allocated to the journalists, so that we can have as many journalists asking questions and possibly even having people do critical follow-ups, because sometimes the follow-up may even be more important than the question itself, depending on the responses that are provided. I want to believe that going forward, in fact, it's one of the recommendations that we are making, that yes, preliminary comments is okay, but maybe some 5-10 minutes just to throw highlights on why he thinks it's important, and any 1 or 2 or 3 critical things that he wants to highlight. But to take 28 minutes out of 90 minutes for preliminary remarks, I think is quite long. But of course, that is better if you compare it with the 2018 edition of President Akufo-Addo, where we had a similar issue. But on that occasion, the president has spent 40 minutes in doing preliminary remarks. So I think that's something that we can cut back on.
What about the time of day that the event was held? 8 p.m. Some are saying that it might have been better to have done it during the day.
I'm not too sure about that, because it is a live event, live on radio, live on television, live on social media. I think others will also say it's good to do it at a time when people are at home. For example, on major news network, 8 p.m. is one of the prime news moments. And so I think the thinking could be that, well, at this time, a lot of people will be at home. A lot of people may have the chance to watch it live or listen to it live. So in terms of audience, I doubt it makes a difference whether it was done in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening.
I suppose those who argue for a daytime event are suggesting that because it's the president, people will watch him whatever time he holds such an event. So perhaps it would have been better for the purposes of, having more time to spend with the media if it had been done during the day.
Well, the downside of it is that, assuming the president had decided to do it at 8 a.m., and if the reason is that daytime, and because it is the president, a lot of people will get a chance to watch or to listen, we are talking about people having to spend between 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. committing that working hours to listening to the president. So it's also about how much time we will lose working. So if, let's say, at Media Foundation, we decided we want to watch, it means that 2 hours of our daytime, the prime time for working, we're going to commit that to listening to the president. What do we lose if that happens to be in the evening when we are done with work? I think that putting everything together sounds like it's still better to have done it in the evening as was done.
Right. Now, let me ask about this. Winston echoes the thoughts of many other journalists who feel that the format of one question, one answer per journalist is not conducive for probing, because you can't have a follow-up question. So it turns into a situation where it's all down to just how much the president decides to give by way of answer to each question, and it doesn't allow for the probing that follow-up questions would have engendered. What do you think of that?
I think he's right on that, and that is again one of the downsides in terms of the format. Organizers would say, well, it's difficult to satisfy everyone. That can be true, but I think that the format can actually be modified. For example, can we say that it's going to be a media group, one question per media group, so that we have the opportunity for follow-ups and all of that, so that multimedia, if there are 2 or 3 of you who happen to be there, maybe you would have agreed on, okay, we have a number of questions, but if we have only the opportunity to ask one and possibly a follow-up, what will be our question? And depending on what comes up, we may have a follow-up. That also would allow for a situation where we avoid the tendency for the MC to be calling people that he knows. Because yesterday, Alex has to be mentioning names. So the thing then is, if you are there from a media house and you are not known to him, the possibility of you being called is quite limited. And I think that really wasn't too good. Then you have a situation where you have 2 or 3 people from the same media house being called because, again, they are known. So I think follow-ups are so critical. But if people can't follow up because, I went with my own question, Kojo asked a question that I really think the answer requires a follow-up, but I still want to do my question, then what happens to the important aspect of follow-ups? So that is really something that we have to look at going into the future.
Right. I mean, let's continue your assessment of the media and how they did last night. How would you rate them?
I think it was generally an improvement over what we had witnessed in the past. But in the past, somebody comes to say, Mr. President, your dressing is nice. Mr. President, what have you been eating? And all of that. I think we didn't see things like that, where people just came as yes men and yes women and all of that. Again, usually we look at the context of the question, the relevance of it. Is it backed by data? Is it well contextualized? And all of that. And I think if you look at the question you asked about relating to Galamsey, the water pollution and all of that, Benadavile's question, the lady who asked about housing, I think that generally all the questions were really great, except that given the limited time, there was also somehow over-elaboration on the part of some journalists in putting forward their questions. I can cite the example of my brother Aruna from Inkugi FM in Savannah, who talked about the conflict situation in the Savannah region, is it Binyiri, and then also talked about Boku briefly.
Yeah.
And he went on and on and on and on, and almost even lost the opportunity to ask the question that he had. And I think if you have limited time to, engage with the president, you really want to go straight forward to your question and avoid over-elaboration.
So let's do the highlight and low light for you. What stood out and what disappointed you?
First, I think, as I said, the president's 28 minutes for opening remarks was quite long and took away quite a bit of the time for question and answer. And given that the president spent 28 minutes to talk about what he wanted to highlight, I think it was critical for him to have brought up the issue of the conflict in Savannah, 30 lives lost, several people displaced, and this certainly should be a high point in terms of the state of our nation today. The president had talked about Boku as a major priority for him during the campaign, and it was the first place he visited when after he was sworn in. And so it was surprising for me that he didn't provide an update on that situation as well. Again, I think, as I said earlier, the issue of Galamsey is not just a problem; it is a national disaster. And so I would have wished to have perhaps more concrete, responses on the steps that are being taken to address the challenge. The truth of the matter is that, as I've said, we have a situation where in many of these places, it is just a swap. NDC people taking over from NPP people. We did a story 3 days ago about some activity in Christia Hone Valley. Certainly, it's a case of the NDC people taking over a licensed concession and going into illegal mining. So if the government, determines and actually muster the courage to flush out all these NDC folks who think our party is in power and therefore will do whatever we want in terms of Galamsey, I'm sure that we can have a quick solution. There are people that have engaged who say, well, when we say we are fighting Galamsey, what surprises us is that the equipment that are used for Galamsey is coming in so much. So if you go to Ashanti region and you go to a place like Amiankwanta, it is actually the center for Galamsey tools and Galamsey equipment. And they will tell you that day in, day out, containers are arriving. So why can't we prevent the importation of these things if indeed we want to stop Galamsey? Because if the equipment are not there, how would they engage in Galamsey? So we cannot say we are fighting it and at the same time we are allowing importation of the instruments and the equipment that are used for the same activity to be coming in droves. I think generally those for me were maybe the low side of what happened. But as I've said, I think the journalists acquitted themselves quite well. A lot of the questions were quite relevant, well contextualized, backed by data and background. And so overall, it was a good exercise.
Because you ended on Galamsey, I have to ask you this quickly before we go, just 30 seconds. The president now raises the dichotomy or the choice between allowing the gold board to buy gold of questionable origin in order to boost the economy, as against allowing things to stay as they were, and then we still have Galamsey, but the money to be made from it is made by foreigners.
No.
Do you see that as the binary choice to Ghana?
No. The point we are making is that it shouldn't happen. But in this case, he's talking about, because it is happening, what do we do with the product? We are saying that things should not happen, and if it doesn't happen, where would Gold Board get, gold from illicit activities or illicit mining to buy? The point is that it shouldn't happen. And we are not just saying it shouldn't happen. Look, Kojo, if you go to the north, almost 80% of young people between say 16 and 24 are all down here in the Galamsey areas. And they will tell you, oh, this person has come to put up this 2-bedroom house, 3-bedroom house, 4-bedroom house because he went for Galamsey. So, yes, people see it as something that advances development and all of that. But we forget about the future consequence. And that is what we are saying. Look, we can regularize it. As he said, this whole thing about cooperative mining, under the previous regime, they talked about community mining, but community mining was literally turned again into some sort of Galamsey activities. If it can be well managed, the people who are engaged in Galamsey now can really get into regularized mining, legal mining, supervised mining. Gold Board will still get the quantities of gold that they are buying, and the benefits to the nation will be the same while we preserve the environment for our future generations. So it's not an either-or situation. It must be stopped so that we preserve our environment and we secure our future.
Sulemana Braimah, thank you so much for your time with us this morning. Always appreciated.
So Joe, grateful. Thank you.
And that's Sulemana Braimah from the Media Foundation for West Africa. I certainly can't wait to hear your views on how last night went. And just before we do that, Kojo Akoto-Boateng has kind of tied a nice little bow around the whole thing from last night, haven't you?
Yes. So usually, like I said, whenever the president speaks, I try to summarize it by putting the things done, things not done, and then things that need timelines for us to follow up later. But before I give you those, there are two things I want to comment on. I think the president's initial comments were very good because it gave us the opportunity to learn about things being done, things that have been done that typically we may miss. For example, I followed the presidential Meet the Press over the years, and people hardly ask about things to do with research funds, science, innovation, even for the environment. If it wasn't Galamsey, which became a thing, we were not too particular about the environment. So it was great he spoke about that. Number two, the 8 p.m. timing is great. This would probably be my 20th year in radio. And we all know that radio, your prime time is the morning rush time and your evening rush hour, right? For TV, your prime time is in the evening. Okay, so if you want to capture the attention of your citizenry using TV, you'd target the evening. The other thing is that because of traffic, most people will get home around 7:38. So if you plan it around that time, people who want to watch and see the emotions of the president, the journalists, everything, it's a perfect timing. If you put it during the day, then people may have to leave their jobs to pay attention to the president speaking. Number two, for an industry like radio, whenever we cover public events like this, we lose money because you cannot read your LPMs, you cannot play your jingles, we lose money. So it helps the industry just to make its money and also get the content across. So when it's during the day, you take 2 hours, 30 minutes, you cannot break for your jingles, your commercials, you cannot break for your LPMs, you lose money. And so that's something people don't really think about. That's why I say that there should be a fund to support the media some way, somehow, because the work we do transcends the commercial business that we do. We also offer public service. So whether it's private media, public media, there should be something to be done. Now, I analyzed the president's initial statements, right? He made about 47 main points about things he's done, things being done, and things planned. And if you can give me the time, I'll go through. On the things done, he says that we've slashed nuisance taxes and rescued the power sector, averting an energy crisis. We've slashed nuisance taxes and rescued the power sector, averting an energy crisis. But you know that one Ghana cedi per liter thing, we think it's still a nuisance tax. So some nuisance taxes may have been slashed, but a new one has been introduced. Now he said he's lowered exchange rates, eased business burden, reduced the cost of living, and inflation has dropped to a 4-year low. There are a lot of truths here, but even though inflation has dropped, your price of kenke still sells at the same price, at the same size. We need to feel these things in real life. Now, he said that he made the highest allocation to basic education in nearly 5 years. And if you check Facebook, Kofi Asare has been breaking that down and giving us historical numbers on education. On education, for example, about 41 billion was allocated to education, 9 billion to basic education. And I have not independently verified that, but Kofi Asare says he's verified that, and that is a truth. But trust Joy Research to bring you more breakdowns on these. Now, We've released funds for health insurance schemes, steady medical supplies, and launched the Ghana Medical Trust Fund. Those are things that have been done. Launched no fee stress policy, refunding fees to 120,000 first-year university students. That has also been done with some challenges. We hope that it improves. Implemented free tertiary education for persons with disabilities, and I think that's one of the best things we've done to enable inclusion in the country over the years. Allocated 50 million Ghana cedis to Ghana National Research Fund to empower local researchers, and as I said earlier, this is a great move, but we need to increase that funding. 50 million Ghana cedis in dollar terms is very little money, and there are a lot of things that need some proper money to go into. 2 weeks ago, when we spoke about even researching into new varieties of crops and animals, it costs you about $25,000 to develop a new variety of rice, for example. So we need some more allocation for some of these things. And he said that we've distributed over 6 million sanitary pads to schoolgirls to combat period poverty. This is also great, but it's going to be better if those parts are produced locally to create jobs and keep the money within, not parts we are importing every year to give to schoolgirls. So it's a great policy, but that policy must result in a development of a local sanitary pad industry to create jobs and keep the wealth locally. And then he also talked about that we've maintained and strengthened the free senior high school policy with the highest budget ever. He spoke about increasing the national health budget by 13.4%, and the NHIS funding has also been increased by 66%. And he says that we filled the gap left by the withdrawal of the $156 million dollars from the U.S. government in aid, which is also great. You know, when Trump withdrew all those funding, we were concerned, but locally, he said that we looked at the budget, we changed a few things, and we redirected money to fill this, which is also great. He said that we've begun investment of over 2 billion cedis in health infrastructure, hospitals and clinics, and we need the Ministry of Health to list all these infrastructure for us, where they are, the scope, when they are going to be completed, so that we also do media assurances and ensure that they are done. And he said that inflation has reduced from 23% to 11% between December 2024 and July 2025. It must reflect in our spending power. So that's also one of the things. He says we secured an upgrade in Ghana's credit rating from junk B- by S&P. We've established a national anti-illegal mining operations secretariat, seized hundreds of illegal mining machines and equipment. This is also true, but it is not enough, because the results we see in our water bodies is nothing that shows that we are improving. So we need to do more in that regard. He said we've recovered 9 forest reserves from illegal mining and repossessed those previously under armed groups. And if you follow Erastus's reports, some of this is largely true, and there are some Galamsey operators who are still trying to find ways to enter these forest reserves. So we need to tighten our operations a little bit more. He says we've increased the district assembly's direct funding from 40% to 80%, released funds for NHIS, Gets Fund, free senior high school fully. We need to verify this, that all NHIS funds, Gets Fund and free senior high school funds have been released fully. He says we've registered and fitted tracking devices to over 1,000 earth-moving equipment to monitor mining imports. Launched the code of conduct. You remember that conversation we had here?
Yep.
And initiated anti-corruption prosecutions with over 200 cases active. It will also be great for the Attorney General's Department to list all these cases and put on their websites for us to follow these cases. And he says we've declared commerciality of Eban Akuma oil and gas discoveries, approved a second gas processing plant. The Minister of Energy is outside looking for investors to come and invest in Ghana's oil sector, because our projected oil quantities keep dropping, and we need to invest further in the oil sector. So that's also one thing. He says we've avoided looming doomso, and power supply is stable, and we've supported local assemblies with funds for health, education, boreholes, sanitations, and markets. So these are the things that the president says we have done. On things being done, we've inaugurated the Ghana Medical Trust Fund, and we are getting a governing board, and the Ghana Medical Trust Fund is going to work fully soon. The implementation of the Student Loan Plus policy for low-income students, decentralization of school feeding policy, construction, expansion and modernization of health facilities, And he goes on to mention the continued prosecution of high-profile corruption cases, including the SkyTrain case, the National Service Authority, and National Cathedral. In the National Service case, he mentioned the individuals involved in that case, and he says that prosecution processes to tighten the case and ensure prosecution wins the case when they go to courts is ongoing. And he said that we've recruited and deployed blue water guards to curb illegal mining, and we plan to deploy more. There's an ongoing military and security presence in reclaimed forest reserves. The Constitutional Review Commission is working. It's being done. Kojo, the two of us have been to the Constitutional Review Commission meetings.
We have.
Yes, and he says it's... And then he talks about the implementation of the 24-hour economy policy. Cabinet has also approved and submitted the 24-hour authority bill to Parliament. The expansion of the Jumaria program and 1 million coders program is also mentioned. And there are ongoing environmental restoration plans for degraded mining sites, including dechemicalizing our water bodies. We also need to know which particular locations and what is actually being done. So these are the things done and the things being done. There are things planned to be done. And maybe tomorrow we can go through all those things and break them down further and analyze them. Yeah,
there's a lot to talk about from this, so we'll certainly do that tomorrow. Kojo, thanks for that. Some excellent summarizing there. It's just a literature now,
Elective mass.
Elective mass.